Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of a man.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is Year Zero. Today, Coop is back on the show. We continue our series on philosophy versus ideology. The subject of today's discussion is women, or the thrusting of women into the role that they are currently residing in modern society, I guess would be a better way of saying it. This was an interesting discussion and one that I had been looking forward to because I knew it was coming, because unlike you guys, I'm privy to that information. So, and I think y'all will enjoy it. I think we did a good job of not being too provocative unnecessarily and just sticking to our guns. So therefore it should be fruitful for the minds of many. But first, RyanBunting.com. For all of your graphic design needs, go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a great libertarian and a great anarcho-capitalist. He's also a great graphic designer. He designed my podcast logo and Pete Quiñonez's podcast logo for Free Man Beyond the Wall. So go to RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs. And buy his book, Project Manicore. It's pretty good. Thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. And don't forget to go to libertarianinstitute.org and check out all the podcasts there at the libertarianinstitute.org. There's also some great articles. Jim Bovard writes for the Libertarian Institute pretty regularly, and Jim is a great writer. Scott writes for the Institute regularly. Sheldon Richman writes for the Institute at least weekly. Pete Quiñonez writes for the Institute as well. So go to libertarianinstitute.org and check out the articles and the podcasts. And buy some of their books, too. There's some good ones there. Enjoy the show.
Okay. Coop, what's up, dude?
Not much. Cigars and scotch for this topic.
Yeah, no shit. Yeah, I should have gotten something stronger than Coors.
Whatever does you.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm out in the yard. I can't get too wild today. I got to go to work tomorrow, so
Right.
Got to be up at 4:00. So.
That's no good.
Oh, I love it. I get up and I spend the first hour and a half of my day just reading and drinking coffee, and then I get to go to work. So, I
prefer getting up quite a bit before I have to do anything.
Yeah. It gives me. I drink about 3 cups of coffee and I read for about an hour and a half, and that gives me a good footing on the day. You know.
Yeah.
And
good.
So, yeah.
You got it. I don't understand people that just jump into it.
I used to. I did especially when I was over the road. When I was over the road, it was like I'd get up, I'd take my dog out of the truck, bring him for a walk for 15, 20 minutes, let him use the bathroom, go get me my coffee, and I'd do my pre-trip and get on the road while I'm drinking my first cup of coffee. So yeah, I like it a lot better being home. I'm much more. I feel much more stabilized in my day-to-day routines.
Well, that and you're getting old, man.
Yeah, well, I'm still not getting near as much fucking done as I'd like to get done, but at least I'm seeing progress every day. And it's not like I come home every week going, Jesus Christ, when am I ever going to get to fucking do this shit? So,
Right.
So at least I'm getting some of it knocked out, And
Yeah.
I got my room painted and my shelf put up over there, and then started tearing up the wall over here to the right of me, where my chair hit. So I'm gonna have to touch up the paint there and put chair rail up so to protect it. But we're getting there.
So I think we were going to talk about women
I was
And
just
slowly,
trying to put it off as long as possible.
yeah, I figured as much. Like I said, this topic required a good stiff drink and a cigar. So with the development of boys and their requirements as they grow into manhood and what society reflects back to them today, we're going to kind of follow the same template. And I think the good point to start on is with boys. We mentioned that they had to go through coming of age, so to speak, a ritual, a rite of passage,
Right.
Undertaken with other men in the family group. You know, the uncles, the typical hunting tribal setup, and that kind of allowed them to understand both their powers and their limitations. With girls, it's kind of a different scenario. Girls are rooted in eventually becoming a woman. They have that innate characteristic where the rite of passage for them is more reflected in biological events,
right,
than it is with boys. And
You
historically and spiritually, it's been related to menstruation. And
you had stated in the one we did on boys. I don't remember if you remember this specific quote, but it was one that a lot of people picked up on Twitter, especially. And you had said that men are made, women are born, and
yeah,
I think that's quite interesting and important. And my wife, whenever I first mentioned it to her that you said that, she was like, "What?" Kind of took offense to it. And then I was like, "No, it's not saying that there's an inadequacy about a woman or anything like that. That's not what we're getting at."
No, what it really means is that when it comes to men, there is such a huge doorway for absolutely being fucked up.
Right. Yeah. If you look at like
and that the destruction capable of boys that don't become men levels societies.
right.
Makes for a terrible environment.
I was gonna. What is that curve called? Where they usually map intelligence with it. It's a curve where there's like a higher percentage of men that become.
Oh, you're talking about the Pareto?
Yes. I'm
Pareto
sorry.
distribution.
Yes. Yeah. And so like this, it's kind of like that. It's kind of like women kind of fit into the smaller arena where men kind of are broader, and there's more psychopaths, there's more geniuses,
Yes.
there's like this huge array of what men become in their lives, and with women it is less so. There's less of a stretch between one woman and the next.
Yeah, and that goes into what I'm saying is that women ultimately are more rooted in biology and in the matter and the material, and therefore the historical and mythological association with the earth, right? Like earth is matter, material, and mater, mother. Those are all the same words.
Right. Yeah, and where you plant a seed, and it comes to fruition and it germinates, and
yes, and it requires that whole cycle, whether or not you're associating it to the planting of a seed to grow into a tree, or a vegetable plant, or anything like that, has a prerequisite for being stable, right?
Right.
And therefore that is exemplified in the narrow, the comparatively narrow confines of the Pareto distribution with regards to behavior. And therefore, as I say, if you have a situation in which men are not shown the way to be a man, right? Then that starts to affect the environment in the same way that storms can affect the growing season.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to reel it back a bit.
Okay.
The root of the biological coming of age for women is in the menstrual cycle, and the attributes of puberty, where girls change physically a lot more than men do in more different and drastic ways over a shorter period of time. And how society begins to treat, whether it's a tribal society or an expanded civilization, how it starts to treat girls that become women changes so drastically in such a short period of time. And that is due to the availability of fertility in that individual. Whereas with boys, both our ability to produce children is extended longer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that same aspect, the way that boys are treated doesn't change until they go through a rite of passage to manhood and adopt the auspices of masculine behavior or mature masculine behavior.
Right.
So in that sense, women are born, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are born of their biological change, right? Whereas men have to be created by the society and other men around them, and that has to be accepted by society, right? That's the other important thing. When a girl turns into a woman, right, the shift is biological, and it's not dependent upon society to determine whether or not a girl has become a woman. But it is dependent upon society to accept whether or not a boy has become a man.
Huh.
So you have that direct relationship.
You know, something just popped in my head when you said that. All right, so just bear with me for 1 second. This isn't like necessarily on the topic, but it does kind of have to do with the fuller scale of what we're talking about on all these topics and where we're heading in general. So I'm thinking, like, when you're saying this, that society has to approve of a man and it does not have to approve of a woman.
Has to recognize, I should say.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. Like it's this.
I look at approval as too moralistic. It's not.
I got you. Okay. But they have to accept you as that, to which you're becoming, right? You have to make it through the gates, and so to speak, and prove yourself worthy of the title of man. And it's, I don't know. What popped into my head is the amount of soy boy beta males that want to identify as a woman here in the last, generation. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh, they can't prove themselves worthy of the label of man. So instead of going through life completely ashamed of their inability to accomplish and pass through these rights, they would prefer to cling on to the biological method of saying I have become because of my biology.
Right. Well, generally, Tommy, I don't address the topic of gender fluidity with regards to these things, because I look at this entire episode in society and what we're going through with regards to these imposed social conversations, right?
Yeah.
As being irrelevant to reality.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
That's fine.
I speak to the reality that will perpetually assert itself despite what we can intellectualize, and that's going back to the conversation between an objective reality and the subjective rhetoric, right?
Yeah.
So this is a lot of subjective rhetoric around the concept of gender, and like I say, it's like, okay, well, you know, to me, it's like talking about whether or not bell bottoms are cool. Eventually, they're not going to be cool, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a fashion or a fad, and it affects such a very, very small number of people in the population that it's going to lose its value after it loses its political power, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think what
I'm not trying to dismiss these individuals, but I'm talking about the greater society. And quite often, like we in the West are looking at this as being an example of the entire world. But the bottom line is the majority of population of the world don't even talk about that.
Yeah.
Right. And they are the individuals that are reproducing more people.
Right.
Right. And they're going to pass that on to their children. So again, it's this Western centric idea that our concepts are reflective of a global reality when that's just not true.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. Like we don't have to talk about that. It was just something, like I said, it popped in my head when you're saying this. I'm thinking about it. I'm like, oh Jesus.
Well, there is something in that, and it has to do with the overall situation where the concept of recognition has been deconstructed, right? And therefore, there is nobody willing to recognize males anymore so that they can become men.
Right.
And that has to do with fathers that have nothing to do with their children, the dissolution of groups like Boy Scouts and tight family units, like the tribal hunting group mentioned earlier, that was made up of uncles and cousins and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
When we have the dissolution of that, we have boys that are seeking recognition, right? That don't know A, what they have to do in order to get that recognition, and B, who to go to, right? And the only mass institution that is providing that right now, I would say, is and this is in the Western world, is the military, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or sporting teams and whatnot.
Yeah, athletics. Yeah.
Athletics, and athletics is dwindling to numbers that only reflect the intention of professionalism as opposed to the intention of community or camaraderie, right?
Right.
So if you do not invest in hockey equipment for your boy unless you're going to push him to become a professional.
Yeah.
Because most kids these days do not want to become professional hockey players, not when they have a computer. And so pushing them towards that when it's clear that they have no interest is not the same as when I was a kid and you would encourage your boy to get involved in team sports so that they could learn about camaraderie and teamwork and things like that.
It's crazy about
purpose has changed.
What's crazy about that is if you keep seeing, and I do want to get back to the topic at hand, women, but if you continue to see people fall away from the interest of actually doing things like playing sports, playing hockey, like whatever, or hunting or any of these other things, it's going to render games extinct because there's nothing going to be, they're not going to have anything to base the games on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Especially in smaller communities. So
Yeah.
when you have that concept of recognition not being necessary for women, right?
Hmm.
Then what you have is a greater, how can I say this? A greater sympathetic and empathetic mindset, right? That is focused more upon already knowing your role, right? And being able to fulfill your role in that society, right? As opposed to trying to find yourself. So it's trying to find your place in the community as opposed to trying to find out who you are, so to speak. And ergo, women being more rooted in their biology, right?
Oh.
There is an innate understanding of the role that they are expected to play on a physiological level. Now, I'm not saying that it's etched in stone, like, which is absolutely ridiculous. Like, everybody should ultimately have their choice as to what they do.
Hmm.
But before people understand what their choices are, there is a hardwired program that kind of directs people towards looking into specific avenues.
Right.
And that's why you get girls playing with dolls before they understand that they can be a lawyer,
Right.
right?
Well,
It doesn't preclude them from becoming a lawyer, right? When they have a greater understanding of society, but innately they're picking up their role as potential mothers as being the first option that is open to them as a woman.
Right.
Right.
And what I was going to say is it's you're not going to hear, or you're very rarely going to hear, a conversation between two men as to whether I should focus on my career or having kids. Like that's not how men approach that subject, right? It's
Right.
not an either or for men, but in a lot of cases, at least traditionally, it is for women, right? They because they've invested so much of their own body into creating this species and caring for it and nurturing it, that it takes away from anything outside of their person.
Yes, there is the much higher investment required from a mother and a father at the inception of
Right.
the child.
Yes.
And men, so much as it may seem otherwise, traditionally had to be chosen to be a father, right?
Yeah.
Where women have a choice to be a mother.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have this trying to find your way within a community based upon a rooted understanding of yourself, which is brought to fruition by biological changes, right? Then you have that empathy that I say that allows you to navigate the more complex social relationships that you would have as a woman in that community, right?
Right.
And as a result, women are far more sensitive of environmental cues, right? And can be very either I should say, just very affected by changes in the environment that are positive or negative, right? More so than the stereotypical oblivious male, right?
Mm.
So a male might be ignorant to social cues, might be ignorant to potential harm, might be ignorant to uh, the disastrous effects of being too honest, right? I think it's called brutally honest.
Mm-hmm.
But those are things that women grow into being very sensitive about. And that has to do with how status is achieved differently between men and women.
Yeah.
And that is directly related to, well, at its base, the ability to do violence. And I think I've heard it bantered around in a few conversations that men are physically violent and women are emotionally violent, right? And that leans into the understanding through empathy that women gain of the communities that they're growing into. So
I was thinking a while back. I had heard it mentioned. I can't remember. I think it was somebody talking about Carl Jung, and his concept of the id, right, and the anima and the animus, and they made a comment that kind of struck me. And I don't know if it's something that Carl Jung explored. I haven't gotten to this point of his exploration, if it is something that he has explored. But they said, imagine your relationship with your father if your father were the one who had given birth to you. And imagine how different it would be being a man, because you were born into this world in love with the person who birthed you, and you go out into the world and seek love from a person of the same sex that birthed you. But as a woman, you're in love with the person that birthed you, who is the same sex as you, and you go out into the world and you seek love of an opposite sex. And so that your relationship with a father as a man or a woman would be completely different if the father had birthed you instead of the mother.
Well, that leans into a lot of like a lot of sentiment that I've heard from many different women across the social board, that they would much rather hang out with or be friends with men than they would other women, because, and I quote, and this is from several women are bitches, according to those women that told me that.
Right.
And that kind of explains that that represents the separation from the mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
That comes kind of naturally as a result of women finding their way better into their relationship with males and the masculine,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whereas males have to actually have a point of separation from their mother in order to have a healthy relationship with another woman.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why quite often the rites of passage were representative of, you're not spending time with your mother anymore, you're spending time with the men. Right.
Yeah.
And this is the separation. And I think we mentioned it before about if there is no clear demarcation line between a boy and a man that is represented by the separation from the mother, then you have boys that are despoiled by their mother who does not want them to become men because they want to maintain the connection that they have to their boys.
Yep.
That was explored quite extensively by Robert Bly in a book called Iron John. If you want to have a good understanding of masculinity, that's a good place to start. It's not a big, heavy read, but he draws heavily upon mythology as well in that exploration.
Yeah.
But with women, again, we talked about we're talking about psychology a bit, so let's run with that.
Okay.
Women have in the big personality characteristics, they have higher degrees of neurotic tendencies. Now, that's not a negative, it's just a group of things that represent non-static expressions of personality that is based upon environmental cues more so than it is based upon what is rooted in the individual. I'm not sure if that came out right.
Say again. I'm sorry. My dog is climbing all over me. If you can't see
I'll
this,
find a less wordy way to say it. Women are higher in neurosis, which are the extreme differences in how the individual react based upon environmental cues rather than based on innate personality traits or innate characteristics. Right?
Right.
So if you have a man in one situation and a woman in the same situation, the man is more likely to react based upon impetus from his own personality characteristics, right, to that event, and a woman is going to react based upon the event, right? And therefore, it's not a static quantity like it expresses itself more often in men.
Yeah, well, and when I think of being more neurotic, I know a lot of people put negative connotations on being more neurotic, but to me,
it's just a description.
It's a descriptive and
personality reactiveness.
Right. It's also it's expressing the fact that when like a person that is more neurotic is going to be more in tune to the emotional state of what's happening around them, right? Like
yes,
yeah.
And that's why this goes back into me saying that women have more of an empathy with regards to reading their environment, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's tied into neurotic tendencies.
Right.
Like I say, if a man is greeted with the same situation as a woman, the man is more likely to react in a uniform and stable way in that situation, and the woman is more likely to react based upon what the situation presents.
Yeah, and who's
right?
involved in the situation? Like you could have
every single factor you could imagine.
Right. Yeah, you could have two identical things happening at the exact same time with two different people that are completely opposites, and a woman's going to react differently to each of those situations based upon
factors that men typically do not pick up on.
Right, exactly. And a man's just going to be like, yeah, like what, almost like apathetic to an extent, which I don't know if that's the correct word.
It appears as though it's apathetic.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But what it represents is a necessary, predictable stability. Right. And I'll explain why. Am I going to explain why that's necessary? Women react based upon environmental cues, right? Which creates a higher amount of neurosis in their personality traits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And both of those things are evolutionarily important. So we'll have a situation where women's neurotic tendencies are heightened after the period of initial romance, right? Where the oxytocin is starting to come down a bit. And around the time when it's going to be determined that the relationship is going to take a serious path, or it's going to deviate and people are going to part ways, right? And that period of neurosis continues to be heightened up until the point where the decision is to have a child, and if so, it is increased by hormonal fluctuation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of this is necessary process for the stable personality of the man to both exhibit his stability, right, as strength, but also quell the neuroses of the woman, and in doing so, create an environment which is going to be suitable for safely raising a child in a positive way. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's called nesting, right? And it starts with those psychological cues. You know, oh, she's driving me crazy with this and that and the other thing, and I'm saying all these things don't matter, but I've got to do them or else I won't hear the end of it. Right? He is not perceiving what she is reacting to, but nonetheless has to react in an appropriate way in order to
not even react in an appropriate way, but respond in an appropriate way.
Well, respond in a, that's what I mean. Respond in an appropriate way in order to quell those neuroses, right?
Right.
In an effort to nest and create an environment that will be suitable and stable for raising a child, right?
Yeah.
So in other words, it's the female putting the impetus on the male to use his power to affect a stable environment suitable for raising a family.
Right. And
if you don't have that,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If you don't have that, right, then what you have is a neurosis that is met with the reality of an unstable environment, and then you have the children that are the product of that unstable environment.
Yeah. All I was going to say is any person who's been in any man who's been in a relationship, you know, for longer than a few months has witnessed something of this state. Whenever I first started working locally and I was no longer over the road, my wife called me in the middle of the day one day and she was like, "Ugh, I miss you more now than I did whenever you were gone." And I was like, "Okay." And she goes, "Don't you miss me more?" And I was like, "No, because I know I'm going to see you at the end of the day." And it's two different ways of processing the same information. You know, she knows I'm going to be there at the end of the day. And so she wants me there now. Whereas before she knew I wasn't going to be there for a week, you know?
Yes.
Whereas the way I process it is, well, I'm going to be there at the end of the day. So now I don't have to worry about it. I'm going to get to spend my time with my wife. And, you know, luckily I have a wife that we can talk about these things and laugh about it together and see the humor in the way she looks at it and the way I look at it and the way, you know, the differences in our perspectives and, you know, yada, yada, yada. So she didn't take it personally. But I remember in my first marriage that my ex-wife called me at work and I was like, "Yeah, what's going on?" And she was like, "Oh, I was just calling to tell you I was thinking about you. Are you thinking about me?" And I'm like, "No, I'm thinking about work." You know, like I'm at work. I'm thinking about work. I'm sorry. That's just not the way that my mind works. I'm not randomly thinking about you in the middle of the day. I'm thinking about work. And that caused a big fight. Right.
Right.
And probably because both of us were really young and we didn't know how to express ourselves, worth of shit at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so like you deal with these things in relationships and that, especially marriages, and you,
Right.
as you're walking through this, I can see, I'm like, oh yeah, that explains that. I understand this now. Like I'm getting it.
So understanding that the neurosis serves a purpose, right?
Right.
And that it also has an end point, right? So the male accomplishes the task of creating the environment that quells the neurosis so they can both get down to the business of providing for and raising a child, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that neurosis has no end, and there are no males that are strong enough or meet the requirement to quell those neuroses,
Right.
and you have a society that plays upon and amplifies those neuroses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the unhinging of women from the requirements that they were informed of by their biological changes coming into womanhood,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do we have? We have movements that are telling women that if you're a mother, you're not good enough, you're a disservice to women. You have commercials that are telling women that you're not thin enough, you're not pretty enough, you haven't got this, you're not rich enough. You should be a mother and a lawyer and a doctor and a surgeon and be going to the moon, right? And you also have a voice telling them those things don't matter.
Right.
That being unhealthy is okay. That society has to accept you whatever way. And all of these things, right, regardless of their individual merits or arguments or whatever, they are an aggregate of confusion. And it's the aggregate of confusion that feeds the neurosis.
Right.
In other words, there is a message in there for women that plays upon every single insecurity that women can have individually.
Right.
Right? It is a smorgasbord of insecurities. All you can eat buffet, you can pick what you want off the table. There is an insecurity there for women that society is going to play upon and amplify. Right?
Yeah.
So when you have that dangerous coupling of boys that don't become men, right?
Mm-hmm.
And women that never get the experience of not being led by neuroses that are amplified by society, then you have more or less the breakdown of how our species is intended to function. Right? We have a civilization that is contrary to how we are evolutionarily informed in order to continue forward as a healthy species.
Right. Yeah. And bringing it back to the mythology, it's perfectly understandable why you would say women submit to your husband, because the husband, as quote unquote the head of the household, it's not because they're superior to you, but it's because the way that they approach the obstacle at hand, right?
Well, it's not even, I think the issue is with the word submission, right?
Well, it's because of what
It's
we
not
see
what I'm
submission as. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is that submission, as it's supposed to be intended, again, this is a rhetorical casuistry that is a dirty wordplay, right?
Yes.
The reality is, women, let men, allow men to be the comfort that they can be.
To create that security.
To create that security, to create that environment.
Right. And
right?
then it goes on to say men love your wives, and that has to do with the neuroses and their desire, their need, like to constantly have that affection laid upon
Yeah.
them, right?
But the
Because
current narrative, Tommy, the current narrative, um, with regards to how it's been swung around, right?
mhm,
Is first there's been the dismantling of masculinity, right? And therefore leaving no men that can provide that comfort, but men still requesting that as their role in society. So
right,
in other words, it's being disarmed to attack that social issue, right? While still demanding the right to approach that issue. And then
I might have it.
the rhetoric is being said, well, and it's true rhetoric is that there is no man left to do that. And it can't be argued against because that's true, right?
Right.
So we have to go back to where did that disarmament begin and how did that disarmament begin so that the demand could be easily rejected and truthfully rejected, right?
I want you to correct me if I'm wrong here, because I think I'm looking at it a little bit of opposite than what the way you're looking at it. So I just want to kind of dig into this like little portion here a little bit more. The way I see it is there was the disillusion of the home by making women feel like they could be men. Like I don't want to say adequate to men,
No,
because
no.
adequate's not the right word.
It started way before that.
And then there
Way
was a
before that.
feminization of men. You feel like the
No, it started way
feminization took
before
place?
that.
Okay.
It started way before that.
All
Okay.
right.
What happened was when civilization expanded, right? The power to create said civilization tipped the balances too much in the favor of men,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
And as the result of anything that experiences too much power, right,
Right.
the concept of masculinity became corrupted by that power.
Right.
And therefore, men were given too much license that was separate from accountability to their families, right?
Mhm.
And therefore, with that license, became corrupted behaviorally without anything to reel that power in, without
Okay.
anything to focus, right? If
Right.
you look at the intemperance movement, was a direct movement to make men more accountable to their families, right? And it was
Okay.
through the abolition of legal alcohol use,
Mm.
right? Because alcohol was perceived as a tool for licentiousness, right? And men staying away from the family and not being accountable to the family, right?
I mean, that was
So
part of it, but yeah. Okay.
that was the point is, men are always out drunk, right? They
Right.
work and then they think because they work, they have the right to go out and get drunk and spend all the money on alcohol and not be with the kids,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So I'd be a
So
responsible husband because I come home and get drunk.
that's right,
Yeah.
right? So temperance was an attempt. The temperance movement was an attempt to reel masculinity back in and refocus it on its true center of power, which was not economic, right?
Mm.
In other words, it was men, you don't have the right to be an asshole just because you make money.
Right.
You have responsibilities here, right?
Yeah.
So that's just an example, and it started before that, right?
Okay. Yeah, I know, because like the history I've read of the temperance movement, and maybe I'm just reading different like articles and essays than you are, is they always point it back to the fact that men were drinking on the job, and there was like this culture of drinking while you're at work and
No,
and the
no, it
and
started
the
actually with the religious concept
oh,
of,
okay,
of
gotcha,
adherence to the family unit,
gotcha,
right?
gotcha.
So it started as a religious movement.
Okay. So
Ultimately,
that was a so the
it was
whole
to make men more accountable.
employer like putting pressure on the government because they weren't getting as much production as they should be getting out of an 8 hour day or a 10 hour day. That was just kind of like a secondary a side issue.
Yeah, it was just a secondary side issue that was
Gotcha.
played up by the movement at the time as another reason or an economic reason or another way to get a different group of people on board for a different reason.
Gotcha.
But it started with what was perceived of as women as an attack on the family unit
Mm, yeah.
by the devil alcohol,
Okay.
right? And it really was, but it was just one of many starting many years before that.
Right.
So the concept of patriarchy as it's discussed now is actually the patriarchy what has disempowered men, but not in the way the rhetoric is going now,
Mm,
right? What the patriarchy did was create too much of a power balance or power imbalance, right?
mm,
That left the door open for men to abandon their true responsibility, right?
mm-hmm.
Under the auspices of accepting civilizational responsibility, or the weight of the world is on. This is a man's world. Well, because it's a man's world, I have to deal with this and that, and therefore I should be able to do what I want.
Right.
But it doesn't work like that on an evolutionary level, right?
Yeah. It feels like to me, I don't know, and so I maybe I'm too dismissive of this conversation whenever it does pop up because it always seems to me like they're describing like first century BC Rome. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, okay, like what does that have to do with 2021 America? Like
No,
what
actually,
you're saying makes
Romans.
no
No,
sense to me.
it. Well, that concept itself is the patriarchy was not in full effect in Rome, right?
Yeah.
The preponderance of power was not yet dissolved,
Okay.
right? In a lot of those societies, like I like to go back to the Greek society, the woman was the master of the home,
Uh-huh.
right? Uh, Rome's soldiers went to war so that they could have land and raise a family. It wasn't for their own glory or for the glory of the empire. It was rooted very much in their desire to start a family.
I guess my thing is I'm thinking about like the mindset kind of like the Greek soldiers had that they would have affairs with other Greek soldiers because they had this
That that
they
that's Spartan culture, right?
right, they had this belief,
Um,
they had
Greek
this
Greek Greek culture, like the Greek city states. Sparta was just a small example of uh, of the way to mentally inculcate uh, a level of camaraderie that would amplify their military strength. In Greece, right?
yeah.
If in Greece, if you had gay relationships, you were not allowed to vote,
Hmm.
right? You were
That's another
um,
thing that people
if
don't
you committed
understand too.
pederasty in Greek culture, the penalty was death.
Right.
There's a lot of bullshit going on about Greek society, even though it's very much in the records with regards to how things operate.
Well, I don't remember who it was that I was reading a few weeks ago, and they were making what I was getting at though. Like they were making the point that the Greeks, maybe it was the Romans, maybe it wasn't the Greeks, and I could be wrong there. There was so much going on in this society during that time that it's really hard to kind of identify who's
Well,
what
late stage
for me.
Rome, right? as a symptom of its decline, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was experiencing the dissolution of the familial role in individuals' lives.
Right. And they were this
And
and this.
that was the orgiastic, who cares, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why Rome introduced Christianity as its empirical religion, was to reinstitute an anchor of stability that was based back in traditional family roles, because
Gotcha.
paganism did not have that moral strength, right, in order to hold together the empire.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, we're going off on a tangent.
No, what I was trying to say, because I think it fits in with what we're talking about, is during the Roman period, right? There was this belief that you could. I think it was Socrates even wrote, or Plato wrote this, like about. I don't know. So I'm just trying to like put together like how I want to say it. So there was this belief that you could not love somebody that was at a lower tier or a lower like level than you. So they would have affairs within the military and to express their love, because they couldn't possibly love their wife, which is why it was such a shocker for people to hear whenever Christianity did come around and they were being told men love your wives. They were like, what? How can you love somebody that's inferior to you? And we're not making the argument.
I'd like to see who wrote that. I've never heard or read anything like that.
I'll have to go back and find it. It's been a couple of weeks since I wrote it.
There are treatises on the treatment of slaves, which is not the same as individuals within your own caste, right? And that a master could not love a slave,
right?
And that the interactions between them were purely material, right? And that absolved them of any moral sense, right?
Yeah.
But as far as the treatment of wives go, you have to remember that anybody of status was married to a woman of status, and that woman of status still had a family whose status was dependent upon the maintenance of that status. So no matter how high status you were, you did not want to treat your wife like shit if you did not want your father-in-law and your brother-in-law plotting against you for dishonoring their family. Right. Again, I think there are way too many bad interpretations of that society that have more recent politicized motives behind their interpretation than what the on the ground reality both shows and exemplifies by how that society operated.
Right.
Yeah. Societies operated.
Yeah. I mean, and you have, what, 2,000 plus years to interpret and corrupt and manipulate like any actions any which way you want, especially when they're like the actions are different than the way we would act in modern society.
Well, even more, especially when ancient languages were developed based upon contextual use, right?
Yeah.
And were less refined than English is today.
Right.
And that's one of the advantages of the advancement of language, is that English language, very specifically, it can borrow from all these different languages in order to create a lexicon that allows us to identify and be very specific with what we're saying, right? Whereas in Japanese, for example, the Japanese, after the Meiji Restoration and the beginning of industrialization happened, they could not apply their language as it was in order to describe mechanical or technical things because they were contextually based. So they had to create a technical Japanese language in order to describe technical, precise things. And it's very much the same as trying to interpret languages, ancient languages, is that they too were very rudimentary and contextual compared to modern English.
Right.
And therefore very open to interpret broad interpretations, right? That just did not seem to fit the social structure, but only these experts had time to decipher them, so nobody really was going to dispute them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And, all right. So when you look at the modern society, when you just kind of like step out of your own body and you're looking around and you're examining the features of what is happening between men and women, like what are you witnessing?
I'm witnessing the results of a lot of confusion, and I'm witnessing it being fed by individuals and groups of individuals that see advantage in creating a reality separate from what is evolutionarily intended.
Yeah.
Whether that be profiteers, right, utilizing advertising and lifestyle advertising to political groups who gain power through disunity, and what I see is that one of the greatest things that we have aspired to, which is the strength of individualism, as being our weakness in that we cannot unify enough to push back against these groups.
Yeah.
And we're having what would unify us as a species taken away from us by affecting the way we develop in our fundamental evolutionary levels. Right? Encourage boys to remain boys and remove the means with which they become men. Take advantage of how women develop from girls and feed into the requirement they have from society in order to gain any respite and add to their insecurities. So you create a perpetually neurotic population of women and disempowered, disenfranchised boys that never become the men that are capable of assuaging those feminine neuroses.
Yeah,
and then you have the replacement of those dualistic aspects of our species, right? With things that are readily controlled by the powers that be.
One of the
like substitutions that are not fulfilling.
Yeah.
That do not have any positive social end. That's what I see. Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, I don't think you're wrong. Yeah, what I was gonna say is, because you made me think of this, is I ran into, I don't, this was a couple of years back, and so I can't quote it exactly as it was presented, but it was one of these things that you hear and it kind of sticks with you, and you just kind of like file it in the back of your head because you're like, huh, that's interesting. I don't know what I think about this, but it's interesting. So they were contemplating the relationship between feminism in the West and jihadis or Islamism in the East, right? And they were saying the why is it that these women that are out there speaking on behalf of feminism, or these people that are out there speaking on behalf of feminism, speaking on behalf of gays, speaking on behalf of trans, speaking, in these ways, are also defending people that would stone them to death or throw them off the roofs of buildings for heresy.
Right. And that's what I was saying about the bedrock aspect of our evolutionary impetuses,
Right.
is that no matter what we intellectualize, we are still under the sway of basic psychological impulses.
Right. Exactly. Right? That's exactly what made me think of this is because like he broke it down, and I can't remember. He gave a historic example, and I'm not even going to like attempt to give that example because I can't remember which example he gave. But basically he went through, I think, it was the Japanese. It was the Japanese women in World War II that left with American soldiers that married Americans, or the Vietnamese in Vietnam. It was one of those two. Anyway, and the amount of American men that took like either Vietnamese or Japanese wives due to their superior masculinity. And so basically he's saying that feminists, as much as they say they detest masculinity, are attracted to the masculine of the Islamist, right? And that's basically what
there was quite a few articles put out after the major push of feminism between 2014 and 2016, where it was a lot of female journalists who had written about the patriarchy, et cetera, and the rise of feminism and massive support of them, and deconstructing the aspects of masculinity,
right?
Basically saying that they're negative. By 2018, they were writing articles about how their sensitive man, right, who is willing to do the housework and look after the child, et cetera, does not have any sexual appeal to them anymore.
Right.
And that they were attracted to these Chad, apathetic appearing conservatives. And I'm not joking. You can readily find those articles on all of the usual outlets, usually leftist outlets, where they're from, and that was the point. It was the reckoning with their biological impetus and the fact that their psychology, right, was greatly influenced by their biological impetus,
right,
regardless of their intellectualization.
Yeah, and that was kind of basically what this guy was saying. It was like their attraction to the Islamist is because the Islamist is executing masculinity better than Western men, and so that's a problem. That's a
problem. If that is the example of masculinity that is left that they are attracted to, then that is a clear indication that true masculinity, right, is in serious trouble.
Right. Yeah. No. Definitely. And that was kind of like the point he got to. He was like, "Look, man." He goes, "It just tells you how fucking how much of like how big of pussies Western men are." Because they're willing to defend and love and adore men that would kill them, would murder them in a heartbeat just for expressing one of their opinions. And like we're so tolerant here in the West, they have no respect for us whatsoever.
None.
Yeah.
None. And I have very little respect for us too.
Yeah. Well, I'm just gonna weed eat and farm and fuck it. That's just whatever. I don't even know what to do, man. Like my boys are grown. They're raised, and they want to come around here and learn some more tricks. So they can come around here and learn some more tricks. I don't know what to tell them. I can't make them do it. So.
Well, me, I didn't have any kids, and that's good because I didn't want to raise barbarians in Rome.
That's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
Do you one of the subjects I want to get with you on is I bought that book that we had chatted about with Matt Erickson. I think it's called the fourth turning. Yeah, the fourth turning.
Right, the cycles.
Yeah. So that's something I do want to get with you on here in the future. And I know like you have, like you said, that's like a microcosm. So I'm really interested.
It is.
I'm
And
really
before you get into that, what I'd like you to read is a book by Alvin Toffler called Future Shock.
text that to me.
I will.
I'll buy it today. Yeah, just text it to
I
me.
think it was, it's relatively short. It's an easy read. I think it was 1971. He was a Harvard professor back when Harvard actually meant something.
Yeah. Okay. But
A very well-known book, but I think it's been forgotten. And he expounds on the generational component that goes along very well with the turning concept.
Well,
So
I think
you have to integrate those two things in order to get like a really good broad picture of how it pertains to modern times and how the divide in generations is affecting those turning cycles, right? Which is not something that he really tackles in that book.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to
For
say
example,
that I
I
think
have I have more in common with somebody that's 30 years older than me than I do with somebody who's 8 years younger than me.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So much of the focus of my podcast is to point out abuses of power and how bad things have gotten and the direction in which we're heading as a society. And it can be a real black pill. I've partnered up with Richard Grove to offer my listeners an opportunity to sign up to his Autonomy Course. The Autonomy Course is designed for people looking for solutions, people that want to shape their own future, people that are not willing to be at the behest of large corporations or the United States government or the banking system. The Autonomy Course is designed for those of you who wish to have complete control of the reins of your life, who are looking to be successful, that to thrive and not just survive, to provide for your family by utilizing your existing skills and learning how to market and sell those skills in order to be your own boss, or learn new skills in order to leverage that into a new career opportunity. So if there's a job out there you've been trying to get or you've been wishing you could get, but you just don't have the skills for it, the Autonomy Course is the place for you to start, to learn how to land that position, to learn how to market yourself better, to gain confidence, and to be surrounded by a community of like-minded people that will encourage you and help you along the way. So use my affiliate links and go check out the Autonomy Course. It could be right for you.
For sure. But all I was going to say is I think there is like, I think the fourth turning is kind of works in like cohesion with the Bible, right? Because there's so many cycles in the Bible. And like when you start reading through it, you're like, oh, okay. That's
Boy. You want to get it? You want to get it?
Basically did the same thing like 1,000 years after the Tower of Babel. They just keep doing the same shit. Will you stop doing the same shit, you fucking idiots?
Okay, if you want to get into that discussion, Tommy, I'm going to need a bit of time to prepare because it's been a long time since I studied that. So I'm going to have to refresh my memory very specifically with regards to the numbers involved here. But yeah, the cycles are extended much farther than decades, and
well, with the reason I brought this up, I didn't bring this up to digress, like because like we're both like completely interested in all kinds of like things. So the reason I brought this up is because I'm wondering, and I don't know, like I'm seriously curious about this. Has there been another period in time where we've seen masculinity and femininity do what we're witnessing today, because it feels like it's unique, right? But I want to say, like, there's nothing new under the sun. Like kind of like that's kind of like how I feel about it. Like I'm like, okay, this can't be that unique. So like, do you know of a time?
What we'll do is I don't know, right? And that's the thing. The farther back you go, the less informed you are.
Right.
It doesn't matter. There's just not enough information.
Well, and it also seems
and
like
those
the
people
further
that
back
say,
you go, the less likely it is.
Those people that say they know this and they know that, it's like they're saying that they know the dictionary having evidence of 3 words, right? And that's what qualifies them as fucking crazy to me. It's like, no, you can like take a guess based upon that, but accept that your knowledge of it is limited to that very, very small cluster of facts. Right. So, and everything else is just speculation. It's you're getting into it's lizard people fucking territory when you go back that far and start making grand claims. Right? All you can do is I can go back to the beginning of religion, so to speak, and the base touch points of the most ancient rooted mythologies, find the commonalities between disparate communities, right? And then make an assertion based upon those commonalities and develop kind of a structure that fills itself out more as you go through history and become more informed. Now, if it matches, right? If it matches it from its inception of very few facts, and everything lines up as you become more informed, then you can make a judgment as to how accurate your prognostication or your speculation might be, right? But so that's kind of how I do it. It's more or less a reverse engineering of things back to a certain point where there's very little information, and going, well, that little bit of information has a direct line to the information that we have now.
Right.
And what are the odds of that?
Yeah.
Right. And that's just it. It's playing an odds game, right? So if you want, I can talk about, and that draws into it very interestingly. And so if you want, we'll do a completely speculative podcast as to why I think this is happening based upon the history, right?
Okay.
But again, it's just going to be speculation. It's more fun than anything. I don't want anybody flying off the handle or thinking that it's some weird grand conspiracy. But there are enough things that make you go to make it an interesting discussion.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely do that. I just wanted to know, like, it the way that things happen in cycles, and even though like it's been said, history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it often rhymes. It just seems like this can't be the first time in human history that men have taken this kind of turn. And I put it off on men because I think women would react properly. Like them being, like you said, like we were talking about earlier, them being neurotic, they're picking up on all the cues, right? They know what's going on. They know what role they're supposed to fill instinctively. Yes. And so I put it on men because, there's that old saying, like, hard times create hard men create good times create soft men create hard times. So there's got to be some rhyme somewhere, I mean, for people to be picking this up.
Oh, there is. I don't think that a lot of people are going to like the answer to it, but that's the answer we're informed of in history.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. Okay. when we created civilization, the goal of civilizations, right,
Mhm.
was to take the natural limiting factors on our population away from nature to more or less create a safe and secure society that would be accepting of those things that nature would not accept.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that was in order to create excess, and with that excess, expand civilization,
Mhm.
and therefore expand the parameters of survivability for our species. Right?
Right.
So the more advanced you get a civilization or a society, the greater the tolerances become until a threshold is reached where nature asserts itself again, but through a different means. So that's kind of where we're headed, which is frightening.
Next on year 0.
Yeah.
This has been one of the longest podcasts you and I have ever recorded. We usually try to keep it in an hour, but this was such a fun conversation. I just kind of let it keep going because I was really enjoying this, and I could probably keep going for 4 more hours, but I don't think anybody listening would want to listen to where this goes.
Not yet.
But we'll get there. We're gonna get there. We're gonna do it. But yeah, man, I think this is a great place to stop. You know, we kind of got a teaser out there. Like we are heading somewhere with all this. This is not just Coop and Tommy just bullshitting about random crap. You know, like there is a goal.
There is a goal and there is a reason, and I require a lot of context, and that's why I don't know that many people or talk to that many people.
That's fine, man. I can't wait till the day that you and I get to sit down and just drink beer and fucking hang out. Because I'm like, God damn, why did it take Gord so long to introduce me to the Coop?
Because Gord knows me.
Gord was weighing whether or not I could handle the Coop. You can't handle the Coop.
Oh, I don't know if I can handle myself, man.
No,
Tommy, you have a good evening, okay?
You too, brother. I really appreciate
it. I hope you get all the shit needed to get done around the place sooner than later.
One of these days, man. I ain't got nothing but time.
All right.
All right, man.
Take care.
Said you're just a slave. All your good intentions took you to your grave. Your pride is how they killed you. With the flag you wave just like a fool. They promised you a mountain, gifted you a stone. They demanded that you throw it into your neighbor's home, and then seize all that they worked for and give it to the throne just like a tool. Well, as we all just stand in line and glorify new ways of being cruel, it seems to me humanity is not something that they're teaching us in school. They dumbs down all around, propaganda, their pollution. They set a cage up on the stage, a facade for all solution. They build a wall, block them all from this mental institution. It's insane. Now they're writing their own rule books and they're crossing all their T's. They're fashioning their people to all wear beggars' knees. If you want a clean drink of water, well, you must say pretty please. It's all a game. As we all just stand in line and justify these crimes done in our names. social right just like we should. Cause this world needs a cleansing to burn away the shame and destroy all the remnants of those who are to blame. And we'll stack them up like cordwood, watch them sizzle on the flames for good. Well, as we all just stand in line waiting for some kind of Robin Hood, our liberty will never be until our right to freedom is understood.